Hi everybody, Kirsten here, and I'm going to be doing a series talk today. And the series I'm going to be talking about is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. So the reason why I'm talking about this series is because A Court of Wings and Ruin, this green one on the bottom here, just came out on the 2nd of May, and I wanted to do the video as soon as I finished reading the book, but I figured I'd give everybody kind of like a week and a half, 2 weeks to finish it. Unfortunately, when I do talk about a series, there are going to be some spoilers abound. There's no way to talk about a next installment without talking about the things that happened in the previous book. So if you have not finished A Court of Wings and Ruin yet, definitely turn this video off because I am going to be talking about it as well as the other 2 books in the series. So the first book in the series is called A Court of Thorns and Roses. And this is the book that sets up the rest of the series. This book you meet our main protagonist, Feyre, and she is a human when you meet her, and she is the main provider for her family. Her father has given up on life and has basically given up on his children. So she goes out into the woods every day and hunts animals to provide food and to provide, pelts and things like that to trade in the market so she can get money to buy things for the home. One day while she's out hunting, she kills what she thinks is a wolf, and it actually turns out to be a high fae that transforms himself into a wolf. There is this beast that comes down who is a high fae named Tamlin, and he's in his beast form. Comes down, breaks the door down, and is like, this girl's coming with me because she killed a fae and she has to. It's what happens. It's blood for blood. She has to come with me. But when she gets there, she realizes that he is High Lord of the Spring Court. And so she's now in the Spring Court, and they all have masks glued to their faces. It's really interesting. It's a take on Beauty and the Beast. This one is, each book kind of has a fairy tale retelling aspect to it, different kinds of fairy tales. But this one is Beauty and the Beast. And in it, she learns all about the Fae. She learns why they have the masks attached to their faces. She learns about this evil queen that is basically ruling all of the courts. And Amarantha is her name. She's one of my favorite villains, female villains in YA fantasy. In this book, she does fall in love with Tamlin. It's a really sweet story until you read the next book. And then you're like, wait, did I really think it was that sweet? It was. I had to reread the book after I finished the second book just because I needed to know, is this really what happened? Is this, did I root for a couple that shouldn't have been together? And you kind of do. But you learn a lot about the Fae rituals and all of that, that you're going to be seeing in the next couple of books. And then you also meet my favorite character in all of YA. His name is Rhysand, and calls him Rhys a lot in the books. He is amazing. He's my favorite character of all characters that have ever graced YA fantasy. So thank you, Sarah J. Maas, for writing him. But you do see him quite a bit throughout this book, and his dynamic with Feyre kind of changes. And I remember at the end of this book, I was like, oh my gosh, the next book she's just gonna make her fall in love with Rhysand. Like, you just know, it's just setting up for that. And I was just like, no, I love Tamlin so much. Why is she gonna be doing this? And then it all makes sense, because in the next book, A Court of Mist and Fury, she gets bound to Rhysand for a bargain that she made when she was underneath the mountain in the first book. And he doesn't call to collect that until she's about to marry Tamlin. So in the end of A Court of Thorns and Roses, she does get turned into a high fae because she sacrifices herself to save Tamlin and the rest of the High Lords and all of the Fae in this land. So all of the High Lords come together and give them a piece of themselves to her to bring her back to life. And when she comes back to life, she does come back as a high fae. She gets taken back to the Spring Court with Tamlin, where he tries to make her his bride. And she's going through all sorts of PTSD trauma because of everything that happened underneath the mountain. And so finally, when she's about to marry Tamlin, she calls for help down this line, this bond that she has with Rhysand. So he comes and he saves her and takes her away, takes her to the Night Court. And he does this several times until they finally get her there for good, because Tamlin's nuts. But finally gets her there for good. And then you meet all of the court of the Night Court, and I have to say, this is my favorite YA fantasy book that I've ever read. I read it 3 times within a week, and this thing's a monster. This thing is huge. I read it 3 times in a week, and I remember finishing it because I was going to be meeting Sarah J. Maas at BookCon last year in Chicago, and I was like, I have to finish this book before I go. Well, I ended up reading it 3 times before I went, and I cried when I saw her and she signed it, and that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. But in this book, it is Feyre coming into her own, kind of coming into all these powers that all of the other High Lords are unaware that she carries, except for Rhys. She has several different powers inside of her that she's like trying to grapple and trying to control, and he kind of helps her. And in this book, she kind of realizes, you know what, I needed someone that would treat me as an equal, not this fragile creature that Tamlin was treating her as in the first book, in the beginning of this book. And you learn a little bit more about the Fae in this series compared to her Throne of Glass series, and you also learn a little bit more about the actual horrible bad king that Amarantha was just a taste of, this king of Highborn that is here to kind of take over the Fae and mortal lands. In the process, you know, there's a lot. You meet a lot of strange creatures. You meet the Bone Carver. You meet the Weaver of the Wood. You see a lot of the strange creatures that were in the first book kind of make an appearance in this one as well. You learn a little bit more about the other courts. You go to the Summer Court. You meet Tarkin, who is the High Lord of the Summer Court, and you also see a little bit more of the Court of Nightmares, which is what the Under the Mountain was fashioned after. And I love how all of the characters kind of intertwine in the character development, and oh my goodness, I just loved this book so much. And that brings you to the 3rd book in the series, which is A Court of Wings and Ruin. So everything comes to fruition in this story. This is very short. I am not going to lie to you, I would have loved another couple 100 pages of this book. This could have done with some extra time, a couple extra 100 pages. I would love to know a little bit more about all of the characters. Everything that happened, the battle happens so fast because you finally come to head in this book with the King of Highborn. So at the end of A Court of Mist and Fury, you meet the King of Highborn, the cauldron that's calling to Feyre the entire time because she is made, she's not born a High Fae. And the cauldron has the ability to make High Fae, which ends up happening to her sisters Nesta and Elaine at the end of the book. And the King of Highborn kind of hijacks the mortal lands because the queens want to be turned High Fae because they all want to be immortal. And he can make that promise to them with the cauldron. And so in this book, the cauldron is missing something after Nesta and Elaine were made. It is not to its full power, so the entirety of the book is them trying to basically wind down this clock of time till the cauldron's ready to be used. And so they're trying to call all the High Lords together and all of that to kind of make sure that this battle, that they have enough people to fight the King of Highborn. The reason why I loved this book so much is not just because you see a lot more of Rhys and Feyre in this book, but it is because you see all of the courts. You see all of the high lords of these courts and their wives, and kind of how they interact and how beautiful the other lands are. I loved the world building in this book just because you do get to see such short glimpses, but they're so descriptive that it makes each of the highlands just seem so beautiful. And I loved a lot of the characters. So Lucien is in this book a lot. You don't see him a lot in A Court of Mist and Fury, but in this book he's in it quite a bit. And Lucien is one of my favorite characters from the first book, so I was really happy to see a lot of him in this book. You do meet Heliorn, which is the High Lord of the Day Court, and he's fantastic. And there's the only criticism that I have is I always talk about how Sarah J. Maas books are very white, very straight. I do, and they are. There's like no way going around that. She's just very, very hetero-friendly in these books. there's never any diverse characters, and I think she overdid it in this book trying to make up for it because it seemed very unnatural. Because she does have, you know, all of the different courts, and obviously different courts like the day court and the summer court, they're not going to be as light-skinned as, you know, the winter court or the night court and things like that. So she does have that diversity there. She has the people of color in her books with the diversity in the courts, but she was very, very like coupley throughout the entire series until this book, and it was very rushed. It seemed very forced because someone was telling her you need to have characters that aren't straight. And so one of the main characters throughout A Court of Mist and Fury and A Court of Wings and Ruin like comes out as a lesbian at some point in the book, and it just felt very forced, and it didn't flow with the story, or the reason why she was coming out was just completely ridiculous for the story point and where we were at in the story. And it was just like she just wanted to make sure it happened, and it kind of reminded me a lot of the last book that came out in the Throne of Glass series, where she made one of the main characters by all of a sudden like a sentence and just like moved on. Like, there's representation and then there's poor representation, and unfortunately that is the only criticism I have of this book, is its poor representation in that aspect. But it is a very satisfying end. I cried a lot. I've already read it 3 times again, like I read A Court of Mist and Fury 3 times. And the thing that makes me so happy is, although it's a very short, and although it is the last in this part of the series, she is writing more books in this series. So there's going to be more Court of Thorns and Roses books that are coming out. They aren't necessarily going to be from Feyre and Rhys's perspective, which is okay, because I want to know more about the other characters. And I'm really hoping she comes out with books about Cassian and Nesta. I want to know more about Amren. I want to know more about Azriel. There's so much that I want to know more about in this series, and I think that is one thing that Sarah J. Maas is so good at, is just creating these worlds and creating these characters that you just love so much that you want more. I don't think that it's going to be overkill that there's going to be more books in this series, because I want more books in this series. I want to know more about the characters, of all of the characters that she writes about. So it's not just about how amazing the heroines are, it's amazing how all of the characters in her books just come to life and are so vivid in a way that you want to know more about each and every one of them. I will never be able to say enough about this series. I could probably ramble on for another 20 minutes about how much I love all of them, but I'm going to end it here, because please talk to me about this series. I know if you've finished watching this video, I'm hoping that it's because you finished this book in this series, because I told you if you hadn't to stop watching at the beginning. So if you finish this series and want to talk to me about it, please, I will gladly let you talk my ear off about it, and I will do the same to you. It also has a coloring book that came out that I absolutely need, that Charlie Bowater, who is one of my favorite fan art artists, she illustrated the coloring book, so definitely check that out as well. Go ahead and link all of these below. But everybody, thank you so much for watching me fangirl, and you guys have a good rest of your day.